Hi everyone, welcome to Living La Vita Loco podcast, a retro gaming podcast for some of your retro gaming needs. My name is Fazz.
And I'm Rich.
You just chortled at me.
I did, yeah. It's the sum of your retro gaming needs.
What is your problem with it?
I don't have a problem with it. I find it weirdly charming.
Oh,
it's just very difficult to keep a straight face when I'm sat opposite you saying it.
I used the word chortle and
That is snort.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I was just going to stop and bring that up is just because when I read the Beano, it
was always a chortle.
People would chortle,
yeah,
and I was like, that's where I learned that word from. But I'm not actually sure what a chortle is. Is it a snort, maybe?
I always had it pegged as more of like a little, almost like a giggle.
I mean, I didn't want to assign your laughter to the chortle.
No.
Zone,
but yeah, don't want to chuck me in the chortle bin. But it's fine.
I love the idea of a chortle bin. Great. Hi, Sunset. Cat. Oh, right, okay. As soon as we start talking, I'm just about to introduce you. Gone. Just gone to the edge of the room.
It's got cat things to do.
The sun has set in the room and the cat has left. So we are going to be doing one of our free play weeks this week. And we love doing these because we get to sort of veer away from our PSP, PS Vitas and have a little look at something that we maybe haven't played before, maybe we have, something we love. Usually it's a dark memory of riches from the Sega.
I treat these sessions as therapy.
As well, you should. I still have my cough. I'm really sorry about that, but you'll just have to deal with it. But to try and cure what ails you with an ale that Rich has brought back from Bridlington this weekend from the coast. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about these? Because it's possibly the most lo-fi bottle I've ever seen.
It's from Bridborough. Little one-man operation near the front in Bridlington. He's been brewing for a while now, it does some really interesting flavours. I think his first one he said was like an oyster infused type ale and stuff like that. So
sounds like an accident.
It does a little
just
bit.
Dropped it in there,
but apparently it was quite good. I haven't been able to try it myself. I've got Nico's Simply the Zest, so it's suitably citrusy.
Nico, sure, that's Nico Bellic of GTA 4 fame.
Maybe
big in Bridlington.
Yeah, probably.
What is the I was going to say capacity. Going back to Football Manager there. What's the capacity of Bridlington? But is it how many
capacity of Bridlington?
Yeah. What is the population of Bridlington, and how would it compare to Liberty City?
I would imagine it's smaller.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I mean, I imagine that most missions would end up with you driving off a cliff, probably into the sea.
Yeah.
Oh, so mine is Hoppy in Brid, and it is hoppy.
It is quite hoppy
in name, and yeah, it's delicious. It's really good.
Yeah,
like I say, for a lo-fi bottle of beer, I'm really happy with that. So kudos, and like you say, it does feel like he's been doing it for a while. I mean, and there's a warning about sediment, and I quite like the sediment at the bottom of a brewed beer. It doesn't.
Well, yeah, you'll be alright then, won't you?
Yeah, just as in it feels real. It's not just sulfites and bollocks.
That's the thing, because when you're in there, the tap room is in where he's brewing it. So it must be like an old cafe or something. And I think he's still using a load of the old furniture. But he's basically got a load of the kit just cordoned off to one side. So staying there long enough and you'll just see him doing the actual brewing and stuff like that, and chatting away with everybody who's coming in and stuff like that. So he's doing good work.
Awesome. So to what's the word I'm looking for when you put something with something, like a food with a drink, not to support,
like a pairing.
Yeah, pairing. To pair this wonderful ale, we've got hopefully some wonderful games. And I feel like last week's pod with wrestling, we hit on some good games. So a couple of 8 out of 10s after probably having a couple of weeks of, I'd say, lesser helpings in terms of the games we were playing and reviewing. Maybe we were going for the 6s. I think like the Lego games that weren't wonderful, but they were good enough. And I think I'm going to bring something to the table here that will be worth what this ale is worth to me.
Ooh, okay, all right.
And would you like me to go first? Do I need to Rochambeau you, or are you too excited to keep it in your pants?
I mean, I would quite happily go first. I can't remember who went first last time, so it seems like a bit of rock, scissors, paper or something like that. Might be the fairest way of doing it.
Okay, should we do that then?
Let's do
right,
that.
okay,
All
so
right.
this is great podcasting,
Right.
but we're going to go on 3.
On 3.
Okay,
right.
1, 2, 3. Okay,
scissors.
draw. 1, 2, 3. Paper, colours, rock. Right,
yes.
okay.
Right.
So that means Rich won, by the way.
I won. I'm going to get some Sound Patch Kids.
Immediately.
Getting some sweets. Probably.
Keeping people waiting.
Yeah. I'm doing Pokemon Yellow.
Whoa! Oh my days, that gets me so excited because, like, you're dropping like a big hitter, like I'm dropping a big hitter too. Like, it's so this podcast is unreal. Ah! Oh, I'm so excited.
Right.
Yes.
So, kind of like when we were talking about wrestling, Pokemon is one of those weird things that I was obsessed with as a kid, had like a big long period of not really thinking about too much, and then became an adult and became obsessed with it again because I never actually grew up. And so it's been kind of weird going back to like tail end of Gen 1. So you had Pokemon Red and Blue in the West. It was Red and Green in Japan. And then Pokemon Yellow was the version they released when they realised that the cartoon was huge.
Retcon.
How can we cash in on that? We made the games before we made the cartoon. Oh shit. They've gone with Pikachu. So, like, there's a lot of nods to the cartoon. There's a lot of like tweaks to accommodate it. Pikachu follows you around. You can quote unquote talk to it and sort of check its mood, and it will say like "Pika" really loudly, but like through crunchy Gameboy. so it's like, which
That was a good impression. And,
thank you.
And quite impressive that the Game Boy could. It did sound like Pikachu, to be fair. Like, as in, more than I thought it would do when it did it.
So, like, the original, like, red and blue version of Pikachu makes a kind of standard Pokemon bleepy bloopy, I am here kind of noise. Whereas in yellow, it actually, quote unquote, talks. To the extent that genuinely, I think one of the most horrifying noises I've heard in a video game is Pikachu's passing out noise. It just screams.
Yeah.
It screams. It's awful.
Yeah. But at the same time...
Okay, makes you want to protect it?
Exactly. The comparison of the drawing of Pikachu from red and blue to yellow. Like,
They did. That's one of the things... In fact, they tweak quite a few of the Pokemon's like sprite work.
Yeah.
To more reflect what kids think it should look like. So yeah, like it's still the same like progression of stuff. It's kind of I wouldn't say it's necessarily difficult to go back to Gen 1 for like the gameplay. It is, however, noticeably slower. Noticeably light by comparison. So like nowadays you can if you want to wade in and catch them all, you can. If you want to go into like an intensive breeding regime for Pokemon with specific stats and specific natures and specific I don't know, fucking backgrounds and stats and all this kind of, you can go hunting for particular variants and blah 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 blah. There's a bunch of different ways of doing it. It's realized it's an RPG and has gone full tilt with it. There's a lot more depth. Gen 1, there's none of that. It's like you catch them, you fight them, cheers, here are the credits, you're done.
Yeah. Love it. That's how I like my
it's
that's how I like my RPGs.
Definitely streamlined. But even when you like whack the like the text box speed up, it's still quite ponderous compared to some of the ones nowadays.
Yeah.
And to the extent that like I was playing Brilliant Diamond recently on the Switch, which was not particularly well received as remakes and updates go.
Yeah.
But I'm really enjoying it. because it doesn't feel like too much of a step forward from Gen 1.
Okay.
And I'm like a kind of Gen 1 apologist, by nature.
I didn't know they existed. I didn't know that you had to be. I didn't know you had to apologise for Gen 1.
I think there's this is going to piss a lot of people off, right? Because the Pokemon community on the internet apparently has a bit of a reputation for being vile.
Wonderful.
And so I think there is a bit of a kind of old school, new school divide.
Wank baggery.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Over things like, how experience points get shared out between your Pokemon and stuff like that, or not. And
you've got to come from somewhere, though. So EXP all is definitely an important part of the game when you from Gen 2 onwards, is it? I think
might be possibly slightly later. I don't know.
But you've got to have some respect for where a game's come from. Do you know what I mean? As in they learned that and went, oh yeah, we know that now that actually it's difficult to level up every single Pokemon and to have enough best Pokemons to fight the final four and things. You don't just want a level 70 Venusaur. I mean, you do because it's a fucking beast. But at the same time, you want to have a variety because that's what you need. And it's difficult to do that. But you've got to let the developers learn that is the case. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I don't think that's something that should have been held against them for being in the very first game.
And I think it's the kind of thing that a couple of the bits and bobs on YouTube that I've watched or things that I've read, I can't help but notice that a lot of the people that are complaining about all of the Pokemon in your party sharing experience points are considerably younger than me, and I find myself being that old man yelling at that cloud, and you weren't there, you don't know what it's like to have to level that Magikarp on its own, and all that. So
find me some rare candy,
yeah,
please.
Exactly.
These Sour Patch Kids, rare candy.
They've been addictive, those ones.
This is the level Magikarp up in there.
So there's also a lot of baggage that comes with it. So there's some pacing issues, around the story and stuff like that. It kind of feels like you can kind of it feels quite linear, but at the same time, it's just you're going to catch Pokemon now. Goodbye, small child. I'll see you when you're a man, I guess.
No, still 10.
I like some of the balance between some of the types. I think Psychic is still very overpowered. There's nothing really to balance it out. Whereas nowadays, between the flexibility for movesets and all sorts of stuff, the balance, despite what some people might think about a particular game, still generally feels better. There's some nice Game Boy Color palettes going on and stuff like that, so it doesn't look too gnarly. But obviously we'll still go through a black and white Game Boy without any hassle. One of the weird things that struck me, besides how the sheer nostalgia for the sprite work and all that kind of stuff, is between some of that sprite work and some of the jingles and musical cues you get, how much of that stuff is still used now, and how it's just stuck around. It's incredible to think about it, and how despite some of the foibles and the flaws that the original games might have, how much of it has still carried through and how strong that foundation was. Yeah. And you're saying about developers learning about stuff, they didn't have to learn much. It still feels like we're tinkering around the edges, and then you come right the way up and you're just about getting to kind of open worlds and dipping your toes there.
25
for
years
better
later.
or worse, 25 years later.
It's funny, isn't it, that you say it's quite maligned. The people are always it's mostly Pokemon fans, where they're oh, you've got this battle going on, and then it's just this Pokemon's kind of standing there and not even doing moves. It's just sort of
oh yeah, the animations all lack thereof.
Exactly,
yeah.
And it's but then if you suddenly had everything being Pokemon Stadium-esque, would you really enjoy that? Would it not extend the game out a massive amount? I don't mind it just being a minimal amount of animation, because that's, Pokemon battles are very important, obviously, as part of the game.
Yeah,
Spending a million years on meeting fucking, little trainer in the forest with his little Beedrill. Like, as in, I don't want to see all the shit. I just want to destroy him. Simple. And take his little pieces of money that he's got.
It's funny you mention that, because
12 din.
With some of the more recent games like Scarlet and Violet and stuff like that, there's a lot of performance issues. I almost wish they'd made the world smaller to make the performance issues a little bit, remediate them a little bit, or like you say, like add a little bit more detail in here and there. Like you say, I don't want much. I've got a perfectly good imagination, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I know how to use it. But I feel like they possibly got to a point where like the ambition is starting to outweigh some of the technical ability.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder if that was slightly the case with these Gen 1 games, like Day Dot. Because like you think about what it's trying to do and the size of the world and the permutations for any given fight and all that kind of stuff. And actually, like, to put that on a Game Boy cartridge is pretty insane.
It is, yeah.
And so I think there's always been that element of trying to see how far they can push it. To the extent that it will sometimes get a bit creaky. And creaky this is.
Okay.
It is, like, it's perfectly playable. It has a very, I would argue, a very important place in, not just gaming history, but like pop culture history. But at the same time, like, there are still issues. There are still problems with it. And, it's the old thing of like random encounters or the grind of trying to get through like the Mount Moon area and stuff like that. And
Lavender Tower and things.
Yeah, and some
it's
of
like,
the
you
gaps
need a ghost
between...
Pokemon. It's like, oh, do I?
yeah. Or like you have to have certain requirements to go to a certain area, or there's too long a gap between places where you can heal up.
Yeah.
And too many trainers and too many random encounters with no respite or way of avoiding it necessarily, or at least a convenient, easy, intuitive way of avoiding it.
Yeah.
So it's things like that where it feels like it falls into that familiar area of the ambition is kind of outweighing the execution. And so that ultimately is kind of where I come down with this. And it almost feels like you have to review the game in two ways. It's kind of position and contribution to the art form.
Yes. Yeah.
Versus actually going back and playing the game on its own merits. Because I think if you look at that first generation of Pokemon, and particularly the fact that they had the nous to look at it and go, actually, like, sure, it's a cynical cash grab, but if it cements the relationship between the games and the cartoons and vice versa, like, there's a reason for it. We can add in a load of bug fixes and patch a load of stuff. There wasn't any DLC or patches on the Game Boy, so like this was the only way of doing anything like that. So I think for a lot of reasons, it has an important place, but going back and playing it, I think are two quite different things.
That's interesting. I mean, like, when was I probably played Yellow as recent as maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, maybe. And I wasn't thinking about games as critically as I do now. But it is almost, and I keep on thinking to Gen 2 and thinking how many little things in the EXP all, like the fact you could press select and get on your bike just straight, you could, you know what I mean? Like, you didn't have to go into your menu to do that and stuff. Like, as in, for a gamer, the ease with which they made Pokemon games later, small improvements and things, and
but they matter.
Yeah, and it's like in like Sword and Shield on the Switch, like they were like just averagely reviewed, and it was like, oh well, it's just the same as a normal Pokemon game, and not much has changed and things. But I felt like they were quite a good evolution, because you kind of got those the sort of like the free roam, the few little free roam areas, and you kind of got, whilst the towns are quite linear, you still get the feel of a free roam around that as well. And yeah, it's just like, I like how they've tagged things on and made it sort of like a different thing every time. They have tried to evolve it a little. Hey, funny enough, tried to evolve it a little bit. Pikachu wouldn't fucking evolve. Trying to evolve it a little bit every time. But you can see that it's so funny that for a company that has made so many billions and billions of dollars or whatever, like they probably have struggled with their game development quite a bit every generation, in so much that everyone kind of goes, "Oh, Pokemon," but it sounds the same for the very first generation.
Yeah, I think they find themselves in a catch-22 regularly because they either depart from the formula laid down in Gen 1, and everybody's like, or a load of people are like, "Why have you departed from the tried and true formula?" Or they don't, and everybody's like, "Well, why aren't you innovating?"
Yeah.
And I think it's very, very difficult to strike a balance. And I, for one, like really like Sword and Shield. I do, but a large part of that, for me, is that you have that kind of familiar framework of a quote unquote classical Pokemon game, but with a lot of the UK nods. And as a British person still living here, it was really, really fun to spot those little bits and enjoy the localization and stuff like that. But that's kind of what's weird about going back and playing Pokemon Yellow, because that kind of Kanto region is weirdly featureless, but at the same time utterly fucking iconic if you're part of the community. It's really weird how they managed to achieve so much with so little. It's a very difficult one for me to kind of score in my head. So fuck knows what you're thinking.
Yeah, you've really put like, the Pikachu amongst the Fearos. There's not really a cat, is there? No, probably a Meowth amongst the Spearos.
Yeah,
all that. Yeah, it's better.
Pidgeys or something.
I'll go back on that. But because you have made me think more about it critically, and so whilst it's your review, isn't immediately in my head spinning around and go, what do I think of this and stuff? What
do you think of this?
Well, what do I think of Gen 1 Pokemon?
Yeah, because for me, everything hit a stride in Gen 2. Yeah. But Gen 1's the one that I always think of first.
Yeah. I struggle through RPGs in general. So, this is like a 15-hour game, and I think that feels like always like the right sweet spot for an RPG for me.
In fact, that's an important point. Sorry, can I just interrupt? Because with this, there's no end game. So you get to the end, that's it.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the ones nowadays will give you more things to do still afterwards to keep you playing if you want to.
And I feel that's kind of important for me, almost like that.
Having that kind of conclusion.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. And I know that in Gen 2, I think I spoke about it again. I'm going to go back to last week, go back to our Slam Dunk podcast, because I remember Bairdy at the time said that one of his best games ever was Pokemon Silver. Sorry, Gold, and I mentioned I had Silver. And I said that it felt like it really cemented, that was the one, that generation was this is it now, Pokemon is just
we've peaked.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's in everyone's veins. And I mentioned at the time that an important part was almost having the Kanto tagged onto the end of it. It was here's another bit of the game. And I think that in my mind now I'm thinking, well, actually, that's it's a lot of extra bits. It was I think the first game was already maybe 20 hours, is in the actual bulk game. And then you can add another sort of 10 hours, I think, go around the gyms and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was that's probably too much, but then it's Pokemon. It sounds so stupid. It's just it's such a familiar sort of feeling that actually, you forgive that a little bit. Then the length of the game becomes null and void almost, because you're going back to it. You're going back to the original. So what I'm trying to say is really, I don't generally feel like I want to play long RPGs, but that one probably a bit of an exception, because it's oh, here's Kanto again. You didn't see this coming, did you, motherfucker? And you're oh my god, I did not see this coming. You're so right.
But that wouldn't have been nearly as satisfying if Gen 1 hadn't happened.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like so I don't want to try and squeeze in every single thing that I feel or know about Pokemon, but you're talking to somebody who, as late as last year, was waiting for the television show to come out in Japan so that I could read the Wikipedia entry to find out if Ash won the World Championship.
That made BBC News, didn't it? Yeah.
It did.
It
was huge. Yeah, it was like it's in yeah.
But find me another video game series that has a cartoon that can do that.
I know exactly. And then about 6 months later, the voice for the Western world of Ash retired after 20 years, and that was BBC News as well.
Yeah.
And it's just and I genuinely am sat there in my son's bedroom waiting for him to go to sleep, and I'm just sat on my phone and I'm just trying to find out if Ash, what happened in the quarterfinals?
It's a real sport.
Yeah, and I know it's just that's fucking insane. That's for a 35-year-old grown man. I get it, but it's just it has a hook in me like nothing else, and it's just that warm fuzzy feeling. It feels like you've got a Pikachu inside you. Just sort of constantly cuddling you. So I'm obviously and that all drills back to that Gen 1 game of this is the first, the very first thing. I think I've already referred to the story on the podcast before where I was on holiday and I didn't have Pokemon at the time, and I was in Newquay down on the south coast, and I said to my mum and dad, I need to go to this game shop here, and I need to get a Game Boy, and I need Pokemon Yellow now. Do you know what I mean? And obviously not like a petulant child or anything, but I was like, I can't convey to you enough. The feeling around the world right now, channeling into me. It's this. I just desperately need this. Just think how quiet it'll be for the 7.5.
It'll be good forever.
Yeah, the 7.5 hour journey back to Carlisle in the car. You won't hear a peep out of me, and I'll give you all my pocket money and everything. I'll go to grandma's every week and make her tea
and Christmas presents.
Just I felt like I'd probably give up. I at that time, and this is how I would have given up anything just to have it. And that's madness to think about that, because it still didn't really know what I was getting. I just knew that
such was the force of the tidal wave.
Exactly. It was you just had to have it, and it was and I think I played maybe half an hour with my friends there on their Game Boy stuff, and I was it's just wild that was Generation 1. So, but then I keep looping back, and I know I need to give you an answer, but it's just thinking about it critically, isn't how much of a good game was it? And how sensible you are as a person. Do you have that tidal wave? You're poppycock, that bullshit. This is what I really think. A 7?
Yeah,
7 out of 10.
I think 7 was probably where I was ending up.
Okay.
I think a 7 or an 8. Like I said, the problem I've got is that I feel like I'm reviewing two games at once.
Yeah.
For very different reasons. I think if you're talking about impact, and especially if you take sort of Pokemon Yellow as the kind of culmination of that first generation and the kind of most refined version of it, I think you are talking a 9 or a 10 out of 10 potentially.
Yeah.
Or at least you could have an argument, a pretty good one for it. I think if you're talking about the game on its own merits in the cold light of day in 2023 compared to the numerous games that have come since that offer you a multitude of different ways of engaging with the IP, let alone playing a mainline Pokemon game, I think you're probably looking at somewhere near a 6, maybe a 7 on a good day. But
that's fair. Just because it's become a behemoth doesn't mean that it didn't have humble beginnings.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think splitting the difference and kind of taking it as a whole, I think a 7 is probably about the fairest you could say.
Yeah.
I reckon you wouldn't need to persuade me too much to put it as an 8. But then, thinking back to Guacamelee and giving that an easy 8.
Yeah.
And did I have as much fun with Pokemon Yellow as I did with that? No. I don't think I did, but I'm not playing it for the first time. I'm not, whatever age I was at the time. It is a tricky one. It really is. But yeah, I'm comfortable with the 7 out of 10.
Brilliant. Cool. I really enjoyed that half an hour of my life. That was great.
that's good.
I don't want to promise that we'll go back to Pokemon or anything at some point, but I mean, it would be remiss of me to sort of think that we wouldn't maybe look at some other generations and stuff. Because I'm going to be honest, I've only really played, I don't know what number of generations there are, but I've only played Gen 1, Gen 2, and then because I just never had an DS or an Advance or anything, I didn't play another one really until Sword and Shield.
Yeah,
it's just
I was basically the same.
For being such a Pokemon aficionado, in a way, that is to kind of skip all that. There's stuff I'd like to go back and see and do.
Yeah, and I would encourage you to, because and I think that this was probably I've kept this particular ace up my sleeve to the very end after we've given it a score for a reason. Because if I was going to go back and play Gen 1, I would go back to Fire Red, which was the remake on the Game Boy Advance. By that point, that came out, I think, either in line with or just after the third or fourth generation. So that little bit later, few more refinements, few more features, different artwork, all that kind of stuff. It, for me, as a way of playing the first generation, I think is definitely the better of the two. I mean, I've not gone and played Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee or the kind of more modern remakes, but certainly Fire Red for pound, I think would be my preferred way of playing it. But Pokemon Yellow was there, it was there at the time.
And so, if you were going to go to Red or Blue or Fire or Leaf Green, start a Pokemon.
Would usually be Charmander.
Okay,
yeah,
fair enough.
Although first time out, I chose Bulbasaur.
Yeah, I'm a Bulbasaur guy.
That tracks.
I just think that you need some fight. You need some. It's probably just the easiest way to beat Brock. Really, I think.
I definitely didn't do it the easy way.
Brock and Misty, as in you kind of go. You think I'm getting a double whammy there. As in you can take Squirtle to beat Brock, but then to have Bulbasaur to take on Misty as well. It's just cruising straight away.
I learned the hard way early doors that you need to get a Butterfree and get it. Learning some psychic moves.
How many people? I wonder how many people in the entire planet have had to level up a Butterfree. As a skill, almost like you go down to the job centre and it's level up a Butterfree. Everyone's done that, mate. Do you know what I mean?
You've got your patches of grass that you always go to because you can get back to the centre easily and all that kind of stuff.
Sorry, what now? Oh God. Cool, awesome. I think you mentioned on the last pod that the Switch is good for game preservation. That's a broad brush, but so I'm going to come in with a Stone Cold classic that I wouldn't have played if I didn't have a Switch, and I dabbled with this game a little bit when I was younger, and the little bit was when I was about 5 or 6, probably. Me and my parents would go to a retail shopping centre estate in the UK, a mall, you'd call it, I guess, in America, places like that. And there was a Curry's, a Curry's electrical shop. And you could play this game in the Curry's electrical shop on a cabinet. It wasn't a cabinet, it was probably like a console. You know how you kind of get sometimes in game shops where a console...
retail unit type
retail unit with a TV in it and things. Yeah. And that was the only time I really played this game before... about a month ago. But I really remember having really good memories of it and enjoying that. I'm trying to tease you in a little bit.
It's working.
And I'll never forget the first time that I jumped on Yoshi. So I've been playing Super Mario World.
Nice. Nice.
And
we're talking cultural impact.
Well, I think a lot of that has come from that I've also been playing Super Mario Odyssey with Oscar, my 5-year-old, together, kind of going through that, and the Super Mario film's been out this year. My house is just full of Mario shit. To the point where even before tonight, we've got a couple of Duplo people, and they just have red and blue clothes on, and now my little boys, even the 2-year-old, call them Mario, and they're just like little figures that look like little boys, and Oscar has built out of Duplo, this massive tower that is in, and that's Bowser's tower, and that's City Kingdom from Mario Odyssey, and then he bounces around the front room and is like, "Oh, Daddy, I'm over on like trampoline, like Kingdom and stuff and things like that." And it's just like,
oh wow,
you know, like seeing his imagination. I don't really input in that too much. I just kind of go, "Oh, Ray, what's going on?" And he'll just tell me, and he's just like, and that's the first sort of thing I get from Mario games almost, that for a straightforward platformer with levels, the amount of imagination that you can get out of that and the world of Mario, it's incredible that has happened and had the cultural impact that it has. So the reason I picked Super Mario World was because I guess it's like, I know people kind of say, oh, the best one is either maybe this one or Super Mario Bros. 3. I've played one and I'm not very good at it. Like, I've played one and I've maybe done like 10 levels, and I found it quite difficult, if I'm going to be honest. I find Super Mario World quite difficult, and I mentioned to you that I was doing a free play game that I found quite difficult, and actually when I looked online, people were like, "It's not difficult. It's dead easy." That is in, you're an absolute bitch ass if you can't do Super Mario World. And I'm like, oh, like, as in, like, no, like, it's just such a precise game. Like, as in, it's like you like, the reason that people find it less difficult than 3 or the previous iterations, or like the Lost levels, for example, like, is that you can get the cape feather, like, so you can fly a little bit in this. And you get Yoshi as well. There's more power-ups that are helpful to you. But they don't make the game any easier in so much that, like, the cape feather is a bit of a hack in so much that you can jump over gaps that you would much easier than you would have been able to previously without that. But then they're kind of like, you're expected to make those jumps anyway, almost. Like, I feel like it doesn't help you so much more that you're like, oh, this game is I'm gonna be able to complete this game now. I've got a cape feather. I've usually lost it with like one Goomba later. Do you know what I mean? I've usually fucked it. Like, it's like, and the amount of times that I would die, and then I was like, oh, like, like, this is difficult for me. Like, it's not horrendous. Like, as in, it just felt like the right difficulty. Like, and I think that's what makes the game like feel really good to me. Like, it feels like a really hard challenge but not so much that I'm like, it turns me off. I'm just like, I want to come back to you. The ghost levels, like, as in the mansions, I think they are a piss take, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, the sort of more puzzly type bits, right?
But it's not really a puzzle though. Like, it's like, pick up this button, go to the other side of the door, then press the button, and then you can get into the door. Whereas if you don't, you keep on going in for a cycle. If you didn't have a guide when you were younger, or, do you know what I mean? Like, how are you ever going to work that out? Like, seriously, do you know what I mean? Like, as in, like, it's almost like I can only help but wonder, like, it must be an assumption you would eventually get a guide or need a guide to some parts of this game, especially when you come to, I guess, when you come off the beaten path. So the game being, what was it, 1990 in Japan? So, an extensive period of time. In 1992, I think it was, in Europe and America. So, you're talking, 30 years now, like, as in, and it's a 30-year-old game, and, the internet wasn't prevalent or anything like that. But now people know it really well. And it's been speed run, and it's just like you said, it's had this massive cultural impact. But it feels very easy to be able to say now, this is the yellow switch palace, and this is how you do it, and this is how you get to the red switch palace, and this is how you get to the magical star road levels, and then the special levels. And I'm like, how would you have ever known, or even had the capacity or skill level to be able to do that without any help? I just don't think that is possible. Do you? And that's a question I came with today, really.
Yeah. So having, I know there, for a fact, there have been various games in history where there have been deliberately ridiculous bits in it in order to help drive guidebook sales or calls to helplines.
Okay. Sorry,
that's
that's
the other
another
one.
path.
Quite often you would have the helpline number in the back of the manual and stuff like that. On the flip side, this is also the era where plenty of games would come, like especially if they were kind of a trickier thing, like an RPG, they might come with a guide in the manual and like talk you through the first stages of the game. But also, it was the era where you would be able to get help guides from magazines and stuff like that. And like, you know, you could go down the newsagent and get some help if you really wanted to, and stuff like that. However,
you made that sound really nefarious.
Yeah, I did, didn't I? Sorry. But nonetheless, I think there is a fair amount of assumptions that, you know, developers could make around that time that would not necessarily be the same ones the player would be making given the situation. And especially like, you know, the first Super Mario game is quite often like hailed as like one of the best intro levels ever because it just intuitively teaches you how to play it and gives you all the tools you need to go and play the rest of the game. And I think by the time you get to Super Mario World, the game itself has got so much more sophisticated. It kind of can't do that as effectively. And I think the game design stuff, like the game design ethos and practice, hasn't quite caught up with it yet. I think nowadays, generally, we're better at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a definite grey area in there where it's not necessarily going to be a given that anybody's going to get it. I mean, look at me and fucking Echo the Dolphin when I went through that, you know. So yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree with you.
Yeah, and it's just like, you know, thinking about the basic game design. Then it is a beautiful game. It looks stunning on the Switch. Like, as in, I mean, and I assume it kind of did sort of anyway in the SNES. And like I said, I'm apart from remembering kind of like a murky memory of being 5 or 6 of playing a Nintendo in a curry shop, like, you know, it looks brilliant and it handles so well. Like, like I said, that precision, like it doesn't. When I was trying to say right at the start, like, it's a very precise game. Like, as in, you know where Mario is going, you know where Yoshi is going. As soon as you press the button at the right time, you know where you're going to land. You know what I mean? Like, as in, and it's just, and how many games can you say that about? Like, I don't think that many really.
No, it's crisp.
Yeah, it really is. Like, as in, I can totally see how this is considered one of the best games of all time. Like, as in, I can. There's so many features to it that make you feel that way. And going back to all the different secret levels and things, I feel like you could play through the game and get to Bowser's Castle at the end. Shock, Mario's trying to save Peach from Bowser.
A what?
Yeah, I know. Who knew that was a, you know, like, oh, who saw that coming?
No
anyway, but yeah, and you could, as I guess a layman coming to this and not really, even now, not really knowing much about the game, I was like, right, I'm going to play it as blind as I can, like, you know, not try and learn any more about it before I start playing it.
Yeah.
Coming to it as a sort of a layman, if you will, like, I could go through the game and complete, I guess, the main part of the game, the main arc, and feel like it was a great game and everything. It is incredible to think about all the different bits they put into it and how many special secret levels there are.
Yeah.
Like, as in, you know, and just have the audacity to be like, oh, Secret Ghost House 2 or Secret Chocolate World 3 or something like that. It's just like, you know.
Go find it, bitches.
Yeah. So, the benefits of playing on the Switch. So, after a while, I was like, I'm really enjoying this game. But am I enjoying the old world of having 5 lives, dying, continuing from the start of the level if I'm not good enough, etc.? Like, yeah, I could do that. I could do that. Or, as I've just read at the bottom of the screen, fucking 3.5 hours after playing it, I can fucking reverse the last 30 seconds. I was like, oh my god, what? Like, so you can actually reverse the last 30 seconds of your play. So I'm here like fucking up 1,000 times over, and actually all I have to do is just stop and like go, well, because you waste so many pointless lives. Like, why? Said everything.
Wow.
Yeah. You just like, falling down a random crack sometimes or something like that, and you're like, oh, that wasn't even a difficult part of the level. I just fucked up. Like, as in, so you like to have the ability just to go on the Switch, just go, I'm back again. Like, as in, like, that it doesn't waste your time. Like, as in, it's like, I don't want this to necessarily feed into the review score you're going to give and stuff, but I just wanted to say that is there, and actually, it's much more geared towards the kind of modern game that I am, where I feel like I don't want a game that's going to waste my time, and I don't. And whilst I like the difficulty level and I want it to be there, I'd also, and if it's a small fuck up that's going to cost me quite a lot, I guess the offset of how much this is going to cost me, how many minutes, lives, etc., etc. I feel like I want to be able to get that back. Like, is in it, and that is in, and I know. In 1990, you couldn't, and you couldn't do it. Like, as in, but I'm not a Super Mario World speedrunner. I'm not an expert. I wanted to be able to play the game and enjoy it. So finding that feature on the Switch, I was like, actually, this has helped me get through more of the game than I would have done probably.
It makes it more accessible.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And I was like, actually, this is great because then I can show this to my children maybe when they're a bit younger and sort of say, look, like, this is the one of the Mario games and stuff, and it kind of like I don't have to break their patience barrier, like, as in, I can say, like, as in they might actually play all the way through to Bowser's Castle because of this feature, whereas actually I think me personally even would have been like, after maybe like 2 or 3 worlds, I've seen enough. Do you know what I mean? Like, as in, but like, so I got to Bowser's Castle by using this feature because it was there. Also on the Switch, so this is a bonus part of the review, which is, like, I discovered afterwards, there's an SP version as well. So I should mention that this is if you buy the Nintendo Switch Online membership, which is £18 a year. And there's so many SNES games on there, and the game, and so you get, for that £18, you get a bunch of NES games and a bunch of SNES games, and a bunch of Game Boy games. Now, if you pay the £36, I think it is, you get N64 games and Sega Mega Drive games. And it's not just like, oh, here's your standard 20. There's like an excessive amount, really, especially for somebody who hasn't played that many Nintendo games. That is, and so actually they're all sat there now for me, and I'm like, this is great. Like, I've got this library here of things that I can go back to. And like I said, without the Switch and having that library, and Nintendo notoriously being very protective of their IPs, for them to kind of release them almost into the wild a little bit, even if you are paying a little bit of money a year for them, is great. Like, so I'm actually finally starting to look at games and go, I can go back and play this NES game or this SNES game, and I've never had that in my life. And that's such a great feeling. So there's this SP version where you start off with 99 lives. Like, you only really kind of can die by like falling down cracks and things and stuff. You can have a cape feather the whole time. The star roads are open, like, completely, and like the special levels are open as well.
Okay.
So it meant that I can go and experience them as well. Yeah. So everyone's like, oh, just wait until you get to Tubular, like one of the levels, like, like one of the later special levels and stuff. And I'm like, well, I can just go. They've just opened up the game for you to play, and it's just like, and that's great as well, because they've just said, we know that maybe everybody won't go and find this switch or be able to go and find the secret key down this tube and things, or won't maybe have the skill level to be able to do that. I probably would be one of those people. So I've now got to see the level where there's literally just pipes and there's no floor, and it's like, and you've got to find. And actually, I completed Tubular, like, legitimately, like, as in actually did it using the actual laws of the game without having to, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I reversed it a couple of times, but like, as in, like, still, like, did it, like, without, like, any cheats or anything particularly. Just, like, literally was like, well, I've fallen out the crack like 17 times, like, as in, but I will get it, like, as in, and if anything, it does teach you a little bit of tenacity, like, as in, you're like, because you can just keep on going back, you don't go, oh, fuck off and put the controller down or anything like that. Like, you go, no, like, I know what I did wrong that time, so I'll just, I'll keep on jumping till I get that perfect this time. And then you jump on that bullet bill perfectly, and it jumps you into the air, and you get a balloon, and it's just like, and I felt an actual, like, sense of sort of achievement, even though, like, I was like, well, this game's been unlocked completely for me and I can reverse it a little bit, but I still felt some achievement because it's such a hard fucking level, and the special level's hard, all are. So yeah, just the package on the Switch It was what I was trying to get to there, really, and it's great that they've included that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, opened up a whole new world for me, a whole new world of Super Mario World. In terms of just being able to play something where you kind of go, right, I get it now from the previous era. Like, even though I've played a little bit of Mario Brothers and things, that is, and to go through an entire Mario Brothers game that is a really well received Mario Brothers game, like, and then also to be able to play the newer games like Odyssey, for example, and stuff. And I want to play, like, I've got Galaxy for the Wii and things. I want to be able to go and play more Mario games. To have so much Nintendo missing out of my life. I'm not saying I had like loads of joy missed out of my life. Like, I've had plenty of joy, but to have the ability to have more in there now and have my house full of Mario, and now it kind of feels a bit more complete that I've actually completed a Mario game from back in the day.
Yeah,
and I also critically looked upon that game like sort of like I was like, I can see why people really enjoyed it and stuff. So yeah, that's my Odyssey. Funnily enough,
it's interesting to know about the rewind feature and stuff like that, because I know when I was talking about Guacamelee, I said about the kind of generous checkpointing and how if you fall down,
I was thinking about it while you were saying it.
Yeah, and like it sounds like the effect is broadly similar, but the difference in a positive way with Super Mario World here is that the actual, like, you're not tying your fingers in pretzels trying to execute it. It's still a basic set of mechanics you're doing. So it feels to me like it wouldn't, that having that rewind feature and trying the same jump 17 times, it certainly sounds like it wasn't an exercise in frustration. And I think that speaks volumes to the game itself and, the tools it gives you, how it encourages you to move through these levels and all that.
It was more of a, no, I'll get it this time. I'll get it this time. And it was quick enough. It was at a pace enough, not like Guacamelee, where it was like I didn't feel like I was getting thrown back in. Like, I could control, like, like sometimes it'd be like, oh, I need to go back 2 steps to then get the right feel for the next step. So it was a like you've if anything's you've taught me over the last sort of like 6 months or anything, is that have the arcade mentality of you're meant to be learning by failing situation.
Get in, fail hard, learn, fail hard again, achieve. I think, well, like you said, Super Mario World itself is rightly regarded as one of the greats. I guess the only question would be whether or not the kind of Switch trappings and an alternative version like enhance it or detract. And I think that question is going to boil down to how much of like a SNES purist you are and all that. And I would argue that for the vast majority of people, it sounds as though the Switch version is at the very minimum more than suitable. If not, like you said, made all the better for being more accessible and like giving people that opportunity to see further into it. Because the reason I say that is I've got one of the SNES Mini consoles, which obviously has that game on it. So there's no like rewind feature or no SP version or anything like that, but it does have save states. So you can kind of checkpoint yourself, but it's not the same. Like, I don't feel like the game is any more accessible for it. I can just start a bit further through, and then keep failing like I always do, because I am terrible at this game.
That surprises me.
No, I'm legitimately awful at most 2D Mario games.
And doesn't it like therefore sort of confuse you a little bit? That like the general consensus that I found, certainly on a few places online, was that this game is the easier, more accessible Mario, even without those features of, back in the day, people would say that about it. And I'm like, oh, wow, like, it's in like, how hard do you want your video games to be?
Well, I quite often go back to Super Mario 3. I think on the kind of World versus Super Mario 3 argument, I think most days I would tilt towards Super Mario 3, but then there'd be one where it's like, oh yeah, but World is great.
Yeah.
And I think the trick with either of them when it comes to the difficulty and my inability to play them is the fact that it always feels like my fault.
Yeah.
Like, it never feels like it's the game's fault. It always feels like it's my fault. And that is why I'm okay with it and quite happy with people saying, well, it's the easier one. I'm like,
so,
yep, that's fine. I'm still crap at
still
it.
shit at it. Cheers.
So, you know.
Thank you so much.
It's one of those ones. So, I mean, I'm thinking kind of a 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
I'm this close, and for everybody at home, I'm doing the tiny fingers together thing. I'm very close to giving it a 10, and I'm struggling to think of a reason not to.
Yeah.
Because I know we've always said that 10 out of 10 wouldn't be perfect.
No,
it would be pretty freaking close.
Yeah.
But it sounds to me like for the enhancements and the additions and the accessibility that this particular package offers. On top of what is widely regarded as one of the best video games of all time.
Yeah.
You know, whereas I was playing Pokemon Yellow in its original form, warts and all, it feels like this version is the more sort of distilled...
it definitely feels like
accessible
having that stuff there. Like, I played more of the game. I enjoyed myself playing the more of the game once I realised I could do the reversing and things like that. But, I mean, at the same time... the core gameplay of the game is a platformer, one of the best that I've ever played. Like, as in, I think about, like, for example, Crash Bandicoot on the PlayStation 1. So clumsy, like, as in, but then I go, well, I love that game, but it is clumsy. Whereas this was like, it just felt like they really honed the mechanics and the graphics over a period of time. Where it was like, and you could just see that, and like my mind comes back to just thinking, like, this would have been just pushing the SNES, like, is it just to like some sort of ultimate limit, like, of just like, and just it is just an impressive game. But I think that 9 out of 10 is like a fair score, like, and the only reason I guess I wouldn't go, oh, you know, that I'm not like one of those people who's like, oh, you can't give any, that you said, you know, like, not a game, a 10 out of 10 game doesn't be perfect or anything like that. But I'd say there are parts in it where some of the levels feel a bit samey, like, as in, it almost feels like, and like, you know, like, isn't, and you get the longevity out of the game by, you know, losing lives and then going back and repeating levels and things, but kind of like, you know, I don't need as many ghost mansions as there are. Like, and
that's fair.
I just felt like, and I get, you know, I'm saying that with hindsight in so much that I didn't have a guide or anything, but I genuinely, got that first ghost mansion and I was just going round and round and I was like, I get there must be a trick. There must be a trick to doing this, but like, without knowing, like, as in, I will have to genuinely go away and read what to do. Like, as in, and I can't say 30 years ago what that would have been, but I'm guessing it would have been, like you say, a phone helpline or a game guide. And I do genuinely feel like, and that's a core level of the game. Yeah. I don't think that without help, well, I just can't see how you possibly could do that without somebody telling you what to do. Like, pick up the button, go to this side, press the button, go through the door. That would take you ages to find that out. So to have that as a core level that you have to complete the game, and that happens 3 or 4 times, I think that's a snag. So that's why it's probably more of a 9-ish level wise, and therefore what you said to me, 9 out of 10 is probably a fairer result for me.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, because like, in my head, I think I know we don't do like point, you know, scales and stuff like that, but I think in my head, you know, like, it would be as close to 10 as something like a 9.7.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking that kind of thing. Very, very much a high bar.
I'm really happy that I've had the chance to experience the game.
Good.
And that's like, that's the only thing I can say about it. That's not the only thing. I've said more than that in the last half an hour, but that's the last thing I'll need to say about it, really.
It's going on the spreadsheet as a 9 out of 10.
Wow. Cool. Awesome. So thanks very much for listening again, guys. We will be rolling around to another of our gaming nights at Horsewith Brewery by the time this goes out. So if you do get an opportunity to come down and see us,
Say hello.
Then please feel free to do so. Drink some beers and stuff, and have some gaming. Hopefully, have some retro gaming fun. And we'll see. Who's shit at which games, like we are at Mario. So thanks very much for listening, guys.
Cheers.